A massive space station hung in orbit around the distant world like a silver wheel, spinning slowly against the stars. Captain Jake Morrison pressed his face against the small window of the human shuttle as they approached the Galactic Council station. He had seen pictures before, but nothing prepared him for the real thing. The station was huge beyond belief, with dozens of docking bays and towers reaching out in all directions. Jake turned to look at Ambassador Lisa Carter, who sat across from him reviewing her notes one last time. She looked calm, but Jake could see the tension in her shoulders. Today would decide whether humanity joined the galactic community or remained alone among the stars. Lisa had spent 3 years preparing for this moment, and Jake knew how much it meant to her. The shuttle docked with a soft bump, and the airlock cycled open. Jake followed Lisa and the rest of the human delegation through corridors filled with beings he had only seen in classified reports. A tall creature with blue skin and 4 arms walked past them without a glance. Something that looked like a walking tree moved slowly down another hallway. Jake tried not to stare, but it was impossible not to be amazed. They entered the main council chamber, and Jake felt his breath catch in his throat. The room was enormous, with seats arranged in concentric circles rising up toward a domed ceiling. Hundreds of alien beings filled the chamber, and the air buzzed with sounds he had never heard before. Clicking and chirping and strange musical tones mixed together in a symphony of alien voices. Lisa walked to the small platform in the center of the chamber designated for the human delegation. Jake and the other human officers took their seats behind her. Around them, the alien representatives watched with expressions that ranged from curiosity to what looked like amusement. A massive reptilian creature with golden scales stood up from one of the highest seats. Admiral Zexthara of the Vorthan Empire was even more impressive in person than in the intelligence photos. She was 7 feet tall, with eyes that seemed to glow in the chamber's lighting. When she spoke, her voice carried easily through the chamber. We gathered today to consider the application of the species called humans for membership in the Galactic Defense Alliance, Admiral Zexthara said. The humans claim they can contribute to our mutual defense and deserve a place among the civilized worlds. Jake noticed how she said civilized worlds and felt his jaw tighten. The way she spoke made it clear what she thought about humanity's level of civilization. Lisa stood and activated the holographic projector. Images of Earth's most advanced warships appeared in the air above the platform. The human fleet looked impressive to Jake, but he heard what sounded like snickering from several of the alien observers. Humanity offers a fleet of 800 vessels, including 50 heavy battleships, Lisa said with confidence. Our technology may be different from yours, but our determination and courage are second to none. The hologram showed Earth's newest destroyer, cutting through space at full speed. Its sleek hull gleamed with armor plating and weapons ports. To human eyes, it looked like the pinnacle of military engineering. Commander Veltok of the Hive Collective stood up from his seat. The insectoid being had 4 arms and compound eyes that seemed to look in multiple directions at once. He gestured at the human ships with one of his clawed hands. Your fastest vessels achieve barely 20% of light speed, he said in a voice that buzzed like angry bees. Our civilian transport ships move at 80% of light speed. How do you expect to keep up with a real military fleet? Laughter filled the chamber. Not human laughter, but the alien equivalent from dozens of different species. Jake felt heat rise in his cheeks as the beings around them found humanity's technology amusing. A crystalline creature that sparkled like living diamond added its own comment. Your weapons appear to be simple kinetic projectiles and basic energy beams. Such armaments could not penetrate even our mining equipment's defensive shields. More laughter rippled through the chamber. Jake watched Lisa's hands clench into fists, but her voice remained steady as she continued the presentation. Humanity has faced challenges before and overcome them through innovation and determination, she said. We may not have your advanced technology, but we have something else. We have the will to fight for what we believe in. Admiral Zexthara's laugh was like the sound of grinding stone. Will to fight, she repeated. Let me show you what your will to fight accomplished at Centauri. Prime, new holograms appeared showing the recent battle where human forces had tried to defend a colony world from Vorthan raiders. Jake had been there, and he did not want to watch it again. The footage showed human ships exploding under alien fire, while their own weapons barely scratched the enemy hulls. A single patrol squadron of our forces destroyed half your fleet, Admiral. Zexthara continued. Your ships fell like leaves in a storm. This is the military might you offer the Alliance. The chamber erupted in what could only be described as alien applause. Clicking and buzzing and sounds Jake could not identify filled the air. He saw Lisa's shoulders sag slightly and felt his own heart sink. A delegate from the Nexus Federation stood up. The being looked like it was made of living metal, and when it spoke, its voice rang like a bell. Perhaps the humans could serve in some other capacity. Their small size might make them useful for maintenance work inside ship systems. More laughter. Jake wanted to stand up and shout at them, but he knew it would only make things worse. Admiral Zexthara raised one clawed hand for silence. The Vorthan Empire has a suggestion. Humans show some promise as entertainers. We have observed their primitive music and storytelling. Perhaps they could provide amusement for our crews during long voyages. The insult hit Jake like a physical blow. They were talking about humanity like they were pets or circus animals. He looked at Lisa and saw tears of rage in her eyes, though her face remained composed. The vote was quick and unanimous. Every species in the Alliance voted to reject humanity's application for membership. Jake watched the vote tally appear on the chamber's main display and felt something die inside him. Admiral Zexthara stood for one final pronouncement. Perhaps in another 1,000 years, when you have learned to build proper starships, we might reconsider your application. Until then, we suggest you focus on improving your primitive technology. As the human delegation prepared to leave, Jake caught Admiral Zexthara's eye. The reptilian commander looked at him with what might have been pity mixed with contempt. Do not take this personally, Captain Morrison, she said. Your species simply lacks the technological sophistication necessary for membership in the Alliance. Some civilizations are meant to be warriors. Others are meant to serve. Jake did not trust himself to speak. He simply nodded and followed Lisa toward the exit. Behind them, the alien delegates had already moved on to other business, as if humanity had never existed. As their shuttle pulled away from the station, Jake looked back at the massive structure. Somewhere inside that station, decisions were being made that affected the fate of entire worlds. Decisions that humanity would have no part in making. What none of the aliens knew was that back on Earth, the most classified project in human history was nearing completion. Soon they would learn that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one you underestimate. 3 months had passed since the humiliation at the Galactic Council, and Dr. Susan Hayes still felt angry every time she thought about it. She walked through the corridors of Site Omega, deep in the asteroid belt, beyond Mars, where humanity's greatest secret waited in the darkness. The facility existed in a place that defied normal physics, and sometimes the walls shimmered like water. When she looked at them from the corner of her eye, Susan had spent 15 years working on the theoretical framework that made this place possible. While alien species built bigger engines and stronger shields, humans had chosen a different path. They had learned to slip between the cracks of reality itself. The corridors around her existed in what she called quantum phase space, where the normal rules of the universe became suggestions rather than laws. Director Paul Jenkins met her at the entrance to the main construction bay. He looked tired after overseeing the Phantom Protocol for so many years, but his eyes still held the excitement of a man who had seen the impossible become real. Together they walked toward the observation deck that overlooked the greatest achievement in human history. The UES Shadowhawk hung in space before them, but only they could see it. To any external observer, there was nothing in the construction bay but empty darkness. The ship existed in a controlled state of dimensional flux that made it invisible to every form of detection known to science. Even light bent around it in ways that should not have been possible. Susan studied the sleek lines of the vessel through sensors that could perceive 11 different dimensions at once. The Shadowhawk was not the largest ship humanity had ever built, but it was by far the most advanced. Every system aboard the vessel had been designed to work with quantum phase technology that allowed it to step outside normal space and time. Captain Alex Carter arrived at the observation deck, still wearing his flight suit after another test run. Lisa Carter's younger brother had become humanity's most decorated test pilot through a combination of skill and absolute fearlessness. He had been the first person to successfully pilot a vessel through dimensional phase space and lived to tell about it. All systems are running perfectly, Alex reported to Director Jenkins. The quantum core is stable, and the phase drive responds like a dream. We can transition from normal space to dimensional flux in less than 3 seconds. Lieutenant Commander Amy Rodriguez joined them on the observation deck. As the Shadowhawk's first officer, she had trained for 5 years to understand systems that existed partially outside reality. Her technical knowledge of quantum phase manipulation rivaled Susan's own understanding of the theoretical framework. "The crew is ready," Amy said. 300 of the best people humanity has to offer. They've all passed the psychological tests for dimensional travel, and they know how to fight from outside normal space and time. Susan nodded with satisfaction. The crew selection process had been brutal because not everyone could handle existing in quantum phase space. Some people's minds simply could not accept the reality of being in multiple dimensions at once. Those who could adapt became something more than ordinary humans. Chief Engineer Steve Collins had memorized every circuit and component in the ship's revolutionary systems. The quantum core that powered the Shadowhawk drew energy from the spaces between dimensions where matter and antimatter danced together in perfect balance. It was a technology that alien scientists would have called impossible. Weapons. Officer Corinne Walsh had developed entirely new combat tactics for a vessel that could attack from dimensions the enemy did not know existed. Traditional naval warfare assumed that ships fought in the same space and time. The Shadowhawk could strike from angles that had no names in any language. Director Jenkins received a priority message on his communication device, and his expression grew serious as he read it. "Long-range sensors have detected a massive Vorthan fleet heading toward Earth," he announced. "Intelligence estimates 300 ships, including Admiral Zexthara's flagship." Susan felt her stomach tighten. She had known this day would come, but she had hoped for more time to test their systems. The Shadowhawk had performed perfectly in trials, but it had never faced real combat against alien technology. "How long do we have?" Alex asked with the calm voice of a professional pilot facing danger. 6 days until they reach Earth's outer system," Jenkins replied. "Our conventional forces will try to delay them, but we all know how that will end." The memory of Centauri Prime hung in the air between them. Human ships exploding under alien fire, while their own weapons barely scratched enemy hulls. Earth's entire defense fleet would last perhaps an hour against a force like the one Admiral Zexthara commanded. Alex looked at his ship through the observation deck window. Even knowing where to look, he could barely make out the faint shimmer that marked the Shadowhawk's position in space. "The testing phase is over," he said quietly. Time to find out if our theories work in the real world. Susan walked to the main console and began running final diagnostics on the quantum core systems. The readings were perfect, but she knew that meant nothing when faced with the chaos of the actual combat. Theory was one thing, but reality had a way of finding flaws that no computer simulation could predict. The Shadowhawk represented humanity's greatest gamble, while other species had focused on building bigger and more powerful weapons. Humans had chosen to explore the spaces between reality. They had learned to hide in dimensions that existed parallel to normal space and strike from positions their enemies could not detect or defend against. Amy Rodriguez reviewed the tactical data on Admiral Zexthara's fleet. The Vorthan ships were larger and more heavily armed than anything in Earth's conventional navy. Their shields could absorb the full firepower of a human battleship without taking damage. Their weapons could cut through human armor like it was made of paper. A conventional approach would be suicide, Amy said as she studied the enemy formation. But we're not using the conventional approach. Captain Carter smiled grimly. No, we're not. We're going to show Admiral Zexthara what happens when you underestimate humanity. Steve Collins ran final checks on the dimensional lance weapons that had never been tested against alien shields. The weapons worked by tearing rifts in space, and time itself then channeling the raw energy of collapsing micro-dimensions into focused beams that ignored conventional defenses entirely. Koren, Walsh loaded quantum torpedoes into the ship's launch tubes. Each torpedo was a miniature dimensional implosion that would bypass enemy shields and tear targets apart from the inside. The weapons existed in multiple dimensions, simultaneously making them impossible to intercept or defend against. Director Jenkins opened a direct communication channel to Earth's unified command. Phase 1 of the Phantom Protocol is complete, he reported. The Shadowhawk is ready for deployment. The response came back immediately. Authorization granted. Show them what humanity is really capable of. Alex Carter walked toward the shuttle. That would take him back to his ship. The Shadowhawk waited in dimensional flux, invisible to all sensors, and ready to defend Earth against impossible odds. Soon Admiral Zexthara would learn that laughing at humanity had been a serious mistake. Admiral Zexthara stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Eternal Dominion, and felt the familiar thrill of approaching victory. The massive dreadnought stretched over 2 miles in length, with armor plating that could withstand the firepower of entire fleets. Around her ship 300 Vorthan warships moved in perfect formation through the darkness, between stars. The bridge crew worked quietly at their stations as they prepared for what would be the easiest conquest in Vorthan military history. Commander Krulfix approached with the latest intelligence reports about Earth's defensive capabilities. The data made for amusing reading, and Zexthara allowed herself a rare smile as she reviewed the pathetic human preparations. Orbital defense platforms with primitive kinetic weapons, she read aloud. Nuclear missile silos that our shields will absorb without notice. 47 destroyers, 12 heavy cruisers, and 3 battleships that move slower than our supply. Vessels. Krulfix nodded with satisfaction. Our tactical computers estimate the entire campaign will last no more than 6 hours, Admiral. The humans have no technology capable of threatening even our smallest escort vessels. Zexthara walked to the main view screen that showed the approaching solar system. The small yellow star looked unremarkable compared to the binary giants that powered Vorthan space. It seemed fitting that such a weak species would evolve around such an ordinary sun. Signal the fleet, she commanded. We drop out of hyperspace at the edge of their system in 1 hour. I want every human to see our ships and understand the futility of resistance. The Vorthan fleet had conquered 17 different species over the past 3 centuries. Each victory had followed the same pattern. The aliens would see the overwhelming force arrayed against them and surrender rather than face complete destruction. As Zigstara expected the humans to follow the same sensible course, deep space sensors throughout the solar system detected the massive energy signatures as the Vorthan fleet emerged from hyperspace. On Earth, panic spread through civilian populations as they witnessed ships that dwarfed anything humanity had ever built. News networks broadcast images of the alien armada while government officials tried to maintain calm. Admiral Ben Parker commanded Earth's defense forces from the bridge of the USS Defiance. He was a veteran of 12 major space battles, including the disaster at Centauri Prime, where he had watched half his fleet die under alien fire. Today he faced impossible odds, but his orders were specific, and he intended to follow them exactly. All ships moved to intercept the alien advance, Parker commanded. Remember, people, we're not trying to win this fight. We just need to put on a good show, and buy some time. The human fleet moved out to meet the Vorthan armada, with 47 destroyers leading the charge. The sleek ships accelerated to maximum velocity, while their crews prepared for what everyone knew would be a one-way mission. Behind them, the heavier cruisers and battleships followed at their best possible speed. Parker studied the tactical display showing the approaching alien formation. Each Vorthan ship was larger and more heavily armed than his entire fleet combined. Their shields could absorb nuclear explosions without taking damage, while their weapons could vaporize human vessels with single shots. The first engagement took place near Jupiter's orbital path. Human destroyers launched spreads of nuclear missiles, while the railguns fired streams of metal projectiles at near light speed. The weapons struck Vorthan shields and simply disappeared without causing any visible damage to the alien hulls. Return fire from the Vorthan ships was devastating. Plasma bolts cut through human armor like it was made of tissue paper. Ion torpedoes detonated inside human vessels, sending cascades of sparks and debris through shattered corridors. Within minutes, 6 human destroyers had been reduced to expanding. Clouds of superheated gas. Admiral Zexthara watched the slaughter with professional interest. The humans were fighting bravely, but their weapons were completely ineffective against Vorthan technology. She had seen the same pattern repeated on dozens of worlds where primitive species tried to resist the inevitable. "Signal the human command ship," she ordered Commander Krulthix. "I want to speak with their leader before we finish this." The communication channel opened and Admiral Parker's face appeared on the main screen. He looked tired and resigned, but his voice remained steady as he spoke to his species conqueror. "I am Admiral Zixthara of the Vorthan Empire," she announced. "Your resistance is pointless, and your weapons cannot harm our ships. I offer you one chance to surrender before we reduce your homeworld to ash." Parker met her gaze without flinching. "We reject your terms, Admiral. Humanity will never surrender to alien tyranny." Zexthara felt a flicker of respect for the doomed human commander. Courage in the face of certain death was a quality she could appreciate even in an inferior species. "Very well, Admiral Parker. You have chosen extinction over submission." The Vorthan fleet resumed its advance toward Earth, while human ships continued their desperate delaying action. More destroyers died under alien fire, while achieving nothing except the satisfaction of awe. Defiance. Parker's flagship took a glancing blow that sent shockwaves through its hull, but continued fighting. "All remaining ships fall back toward Mars," Parker ordered as his tactical display showed the approaching alien armada. "Continue the fighting withdrawal as planned." The human fleet began what appeared to be a panicked retreat toward the inner solar system. Ships broke formation and scattered in different directions, while the Vorthan pursuers followed at their leisure. To any observer, it looked like the complete collapse of organized resistance. Admiral Zexthara did not realize was that the human retreat was carefully coordinated to draw her fleet through specific coordinates in space. Every ship carried sealed orders that could only be opened when they reached predetermined positions. The retreat was not random, but precisely calculated. Commander, Cruel Thix reported that several human vessels were regrouping near Mars, while others continued their flight toward Earth. Should we pursue the scattered ships, Admiral, or focus on the main group? Zexthara considered the tactical situation. The humans were clearly broken and disorganized after facing superior firepower. Standard procedure would be to eliminate the regrouping ships first, then hunt down the scattered survivors. Follow the main group, she decided. Once we destroy the remaining organized forces, the scattered ships will surrender or die alone. The Vorthan fleet changed course to pursue the human ships that had regrouped near Mars. The alien formation moved through space that looked empty to every sensor they possessed. What they could not detect was that they had just entered a region of space where the normal rules no longer applied, hidden in dimensions that existed parallel to normal reality. The U.E.'s Shadowhawk watched and waited. Captain Alex Carter studied the approaching alien fleet through sensors that could perceive multiple layers of space and time simultaneously. Soon Admiral Zexthara would learn that humanity's greatest weapon was not the ships she could see, but the one she couldn't. Captain Alex Carter watched the Vorthan fleet through sensors that existed in 11 dimensions at once. The U.E.'s Shadowhawk hung motionless in quantum phase space, completely invisible to every form of detection the aliens possessed. Around him, his crew maintained perfect combat silence, as they had been trained to do for the past 5 years. The alien ships moved through normal space, like predators hunting wounded prey. Admiral Zexthara's flagship, the Eternal Dominion, led the formation, with its massive bulk bristling with weapons that could destroy entire cities. Behind it, 300 warships followed in perfect order, confident in their overwhelming superiority. Lieutenant Commander Amy Rodriguez whispered her status report, so quietly that her voice would not carry, even if they had been in normal space. All systems ready, Captain. The quantum core is operating at maximum efficiency, and all weapon systems show green across the board. Alex studied the tactical display that showed the Vorthan formation in perfect detail. The aliens had arranged themselves with their most powerful ships protecting Admiral Zexthara's flagship, while smaller vessels formed defensive screens around the edges. It was a formation designed to repel conventional attacks from enemy fleets. The formation could not defend against was an attack from outside normal space and time. The Shadowhawk existed in dimensions the Vorthan tactical computers did not even know were possible. Their shields and armor meant nothing against weapons that struck from angles that had no names. Chief Engineer Steve Collins reported that the dimensional phase drive was stable and ready for combat operations. The ship could transition between normal space and quantum flux in less than 3 seconds. More importantly, it could fire its weapons while remaining partially phased, making retaliation impossible. Target the flagship's command section. Alex ordered Weapons Officer Karen Walsh. We're going to remove their leader and watch the rest of them panic. Karen's fingers moved across her control panel with practiced precision. The dimensional lance weapon system powered up, drawing energy from the spaces between realities, where matter and antimatter danced in perfect balance. The weapon had never been tested against alien shields, but theoretical models suggested it would ignore them completely. Weapon charged and ready, Captain, Karen reported. Target locked on the enemy flagship's bridge section. Alex felt the familiar calm that came over him before combat. He had flown test missions through dimensional space for 3 years, but this was different. Today he would find out if humanity's greatest gamble would pay off, or if they had built an expensive failure. Fire, he commanded. The Shadowhawk phased partially into normal space, just long enough to extend its primary weapon system. The dimensional lance tore a rift in space and time itself, then channeled the raw energy of a collapsing micro-dimension into a focused beam that traveled through 11 dimensions simultaneously. The weapon struck the Eternal Dominion amidships and punched completely through the massive dreadnought as if its armor was made of paper. Secondary explosions rippled along the alien flagship's hull as critical systems overloaded and atmosphere vented from dozens of breaches. The ship that had been considered invincible by every species in the galaxy began listing to one side. Chaos erupted across the Vorthan fleet as ships desperately tried to locate the source of the attack. Their sensors detected the weapon's impact, but could find no enemy vessel anywhere in normal space. Plasma cannons fired randomly into empty vacuum, while ion torpedoes detonated harmlessly against nothing but darkness. Phase shift and relocate, Alex commanded as the Shadowhawk slipped back into dimensional flux. The ship emerged 3,000 kilometers away behind the alien formation, where their sensors still could not detect its presence. Admiral Zexthara dragged herself to the emergency command center as her flagship shuddered under the impact of cascading system failures. Half her bridge crew was dead, and the ship's main computer systems were offline. For the first time in her military career, she faced an enemy she could not see or understand. "Report," she snarled at Commander Krulthix, who was bleeding from a chi. "Head wound. Unknown weapon impact on sections 12 through 15. Krulthix replied while trying to make sense of the damage reports. The attack came from no detectable source, and our shields provided no protection whatsoever. Zexthara stared at the tactical display that showed empty space in all directions. Every instinct told her that an enemy ship had to be out there, but her sensors insisted they were alone. The attack had been impossible, according to every law of physics she understood. The Shadowhawk launched a spread of quantum torpedoes from its position behind the alien fleet. Each torpedo was a miniature dimensional implosion that existed in multiple realities at once. The weapons phased through normal space and struck 6 Vorthan heavy cruisers. Simultaneously, the targeted ships simply ceased to exist. They did not explode or break apart, but rather seemed to fold in on themselves as their matter was scattered across 11 dimensions. Where 6 powerful warships had been floating seconds before, there was now only empty space and expanding clouds of exotic particles. Terror spread through the Vorthan fleet as captains realized they were fighting something completely beyond their understanding. Ships that had never known fear found themselves being systematically destroyed by an enemy that attacked from impossible positions. Some vessels attempted to retreat, only to discover that their invisible attacker could move faster than their engines could carry them. All ships concentrate fire on Grid 77 Alpha, Admiral Zexthara commanded desperately. Maximum firepower spread pattern. Hundreds of plasma bolts and ion torpedoes saturated the empty space where her tactical computers suggested the enemy might be hiding. The weapons found nothing but vacuum, while the mysterious attacker continued its methodical destruction of her fleet. The Shadowhawk phased in and out of normal space like a ghost made of metal and death. Each appearance lasted only long enough to fire its weapons before vanishing again into dimensions the Vorthan sensors could not penetrate. Alex Carter had become the most dangerous predator in known space, commanding a ship that redefined the very concept of warfare. 2 cruiser squadrons are requesting permission to withdraw, Commander Krulthix reported as more ships died around them. Morale is collapsing throughout the fleet. Zexthara felt something she had never experienced before in her long military career. Fear. Not fear of death, which she had faced many times, but fear of the unknown. Her enemy was using technology that made her most advanced ships look like primitive toys. Karen. Walsh targeted another group of alien vessels with the dimensional land system. The beam carved through 3 destroyers in a single shot, while their return fire struck nothing but empty space. The psychological impact on the surviving crews was devastating as they watched their companions die. without being able to fight back. Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the alien flagship, Amy Rodriguez reported. Admiral Zexthara wants to talk. Alex smiled grimly as he watched another Vorthan ship fold in on itself under quantum torpedo fire. Tell the Admiral that humanity is done talking. Now we're teaching. The battle that would become known as the Miracle of Sol continued for 3 hours as the U.E.'s Shadowhawk systematically dismantled the most powerful invasion fleet the galaxy had seen in centuries. Captain Alex Carter moved his ship through dimensions. The Vorthan Empire did not know existed while his crew destroyed alien vessels with weapons that ignored every defense known to science. Admiral Zexthara watched her fleet die from the emergency command center of her crippled flagship. Ships that had conquered 17 different species now exploded like firecrackers under the assault of an enemy they could not see, touch, or understand. The psychological impact was more devastating than the physical destruction as veteran crews, who had never known defeat, faced complete helplessness. Commander Cruel Thix reported that over half their fleet was gone, and the survivors were requesting permission to retreat. Some captains had already broken formation and were trying to escape toward the edge of the solar system. Even the most disciplined Vorthan warriors could not maintain order when facing an impossible enemy. Signal all ships to fall back to minimum. Safe distance. Zexthara commanded through gritted teeth. The order tasted like poison in her mouth, but she had no choice. To continue the attack would mean the complete destruction of her remaining forces. Alex Carter allowed several dozen alien ships to escape, including Admiral Zexthara's damaged flagship. He wanted survivors who could carry the message back to the Galactic Council and the rest of the galaxy. The age of alien superiority in this sector of space had ended, and everyone needed to know it. Lieutenant Commander Amy Rodriguez monitored the retreating Vorthan vessels as they limped away from Earth. Many showed severe damage from dimensional weapons that had torn through their hulls like paper. The survivors would need weeks to repair their ships and months to recover from the psychological trauma of their defeat. Should we pursue? Captain Weapons Officer Karen Walsh asked as she watched the aliens flee. Alex shook his head. Let them go. They've learned the lesson we wanted to teach. Sometimes the most effective weapon is the one your enemy never sees coming. News of the victory spread across human space within hours as Admiral Ben Parker transmitted detailed reports of the battle to Earth Command. The footage showed Vorthan ships simply vanishing under attack from an invisible enemy, while their return fire struck nothing but empty space. Even the humans who had built the Shadowhawk found the recordings hard to believe. Dr. Susan Hayes watched the battle recordings from Site Omega with tears of joy in her eyes. 15 years of theoretical work had been vindicated in the most dramatic way possible. The quantum phase technology that alien scientists would have called impossible had saved humanity from conquest and established them as a major power in galactic politics. Director Paul Jenkins opened a communication channel to Earth's Unified. Command, mission accomplished, he reported with quiet satisfaction. The Phantom Protocol has exceeded all expectations. The aliens now know that humanity is not to be underestimated. Within days, news of the battle reached every corner of the galaxy through the faster-than-light communication networks that connected all civilized worlds. The same species that had mocked humanity's primitive technology now demanded to know how a single human ship had destroyed an entire Vorthan battle fleet. Some alien governments refused to believe the initial reports until they reviewed sensor logs from the surviving Vorthan vessels. The data showed weapons impacts with no detectable source, and ships being destroyed by forces that their science could not explain. Humanity had achieved what every military strategist had thought impossible. 3 weeks after the battle, Captain Jake Morrison returned to the Galactic Council Station, but this time the atmosphere was completely different. The same alien representatives who had dismissed humanity with laughter now watched Ambassador Lisa Carter with expressions that ranged from respect to barely concealed fear. The council chamber buzzed with nervous energy as Lisa took her place on the central platform. Around her, the delegates whispered among themselves in dozens of alien languages while trying to understand how the humans had achieved such an impossible victory over the Vorthan Empire. Admiral Zexthara entered the chamber wearing the scars of her defeat like badges of shame. Her golden scales bore burn marks from her ship's damage, and she moved with the careful gait of someone still recovering from serious injuries. When she spoke, her voice carried none of its former arrogance. The Vorthan Empire formally apologizes to the human delegation for our previous dismissive attitude, she announced to the stunned assembly. We have learned that humanity possesses military capabilities far beyond what their conventional technology suggested. Commander Veltok of the Hive Collective nervously adjusted his position with all four arms. The insectoid being who had mocked human ships as primitive now spoke in respectful tones. The collective wishes to establish peaceful relations with humanity and offers a mutual non-aggression pact. The crystalline representative from the Nexus Federation sparkled with agitation as it formulated its question. We must ask Ambassador Carter, how many vessels, like the one that defeated Admiral Zexthara, does humanity currently possess? Lisa smiled with diplomatic precision while carefully avoiding a direct answer. That information remains classified by Earth's Unified Command. However, I can assure this assembly that the ship you refer to was merely our first attempt at this new technology. We have learned much from its combat performance. The truth known only to the highest levels of human government was that the Shadowhawk remained unique for now. But construction had already begun on 5 additional ships of the same class, while Dr. Susan Hayes worked on theoretical designs that would make the Shadowhawk look primitive by comparison. Jake Morrison watched the alien delegates with quiet satisfaction as they realized that the balance of power in the galaxy had shifted permanently. Species that had dominated space for millennia now faced the reality that humanity had achieved technological superiority through pure innovation and determination. The vote on humanity's membership in the Galactic Defense Alliance was unanimous. But this time, every species voted in favor of acceptance. The same beings who had suggested humans might serve as entertainers now welcomed them as equal partners in galactic defense. As the human delegation prepared to return to Earth with news of their diplomatic triumph, Captain Alex Carter and the crew of the Shadowhawk maintained their patrol of the outer solar system. The invisible ship moved through quantum phase space, ready to defend humanity's homeworld against any threat that might emerge from the depths of space. Dr. Susan Hayes stood in her laboratory at Site Omega, reviewing equations that would revolutionize space travel itself. Humanity had announced its presence to the galaxy, not through conquest or subjugation, but by proving that innovation and determination could overcome any technological disadvantage. The aliens had laughed at humanity's primitive starships and suggested they might serve as circus entertainers. Now those same species sought human protection and begged for access to technologies they could barely comprehend. The laughter had stopped, and in its place was the respectful silence of beings who had learned not to underestimate the quiet species from the small yellow star.